Wonderful. So I think it's 5 o'clock, so maybe we should get
Sure.
started.
Okay.
Amazing. Thank you
All
guys
right.
for joining. I want to introduce, first of all, welcome to all of our attendees who are zooming in from the UAE and around the world. Just want to introduce our amazing guest today, Hanna Wu, who is going to enroll in the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, the #1 undergraduate program in the country. Also the oldest business school in the entire US, older than Harvard's from what I understand. Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah. So amazing there. You're following the footsteps of greatness. I think the most famous Wharton alum right now is actually President Donald Trump, but we'll try not to mention his name too much. And obviously here with Ariane, who is one of our counselors who is stranded in California for the last 2 months, but now about to board a repatriation flight back to the UAE in just a couple weeks' time.
Yeah.
So thank you both for being here. I think everybody is very excited to hear about your journey, Hanna. For sure, some of the challenges that you faced and, some of the insight that you'll share will be extremely valuable, especially for our younger students. With that, I just want to encourage any attendees who have questions to please post them in the Q&A at the bottom, and then we will open the floor to questions at the end of the discussion, and I will moderate that. Thank you again for joining. I'm going to hand it over to you, Ariane and Hanna,
Sure.
and you guys take it from here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So as Peter mentioned, my name is Ariane, and I just want to welcome everyone to this second IB Insider episode. Usually we have a big event, but given the situation, we're doing a series of episodes. Last week, our counselor Angie did an episode with her student who got into Stanford. And today I'm very excited to be joined by Hanna, who's my superstar student who got into Wharton. Hanna, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so like Peter and Ariane mentioned, my name is Hanna Wu. I was born and raised in Abu Dhabi, and I think my high school experience is something that is a little bit different to everyone else's. So I went to high school here in Abu Dhabi at Cranleigh Abu Dhabi School, which followed the British curriculum for the first 2 years. And then for the remaining time of my high school career, I went to a boarding school in Boston called Phillips Academy, Andover. And then in the fall, I'm really happy to say I'm going to be attending Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania.
Cool. Something that I noticed when we first started working together is that we have a lot in common. So I know that we both love music, specifically like classical music. We both dance. Also, you, as you mentioned, you were a transfer student. So I don't think I ever told you this. I had actually transferred from a boarding school in Ohio to a school in California for high school. And something that I personally struggled with was continuing with extracurricular activities, specifically obtaining like leadership roles and continuing with that. So I know that some of our Hale students are considering transferring or might transfer high schools. What advice would you have for them in terms of building their extracurriculars or getting leadership roles?
So at first when I went to Andover, like it's such a big school with so many opportunities. Like we have over like 200 clubs on campus. So at first I was really overwhelmed. I want to try everything. I want to be part of everything. But it came to a certain point where I just didn't have enough time to, and I really had to sit down and see what I prioritize. So like throughout my whole life, music, like you said, and dance has been a big aspect of my life and has played like a crucial role, I'd say. So I knew that going to Andover, I wanted to prioritize those two things. So some things that I do on campus. So I'm the co-head of our handbell choir ensemble. I am part of jazz band. I also participate in a community engagement program where I teach a kid from an underprivileged town nearby how to play piano. And in terms of dance, I'm part of the step team on campus. I'm the captain of the step team on campus, which is super fun. And I think getting these leadership roles, the biggest thing is showing commitment and showing effort towards the club or the organization, and just showing that you really care about it, and they can tell from that.
And how were you able to incorporate like your involvement in extracurriculars to your essays, specifically your supplemental essays?
There are a lot of opportunities for like supplemental essays to talk about things that you like to do. So I know that for one supplemental essay, they said, write about an extracurricular activity that is meaningful to you. So I wrote about the varsity step team that I'm a part of. And I kind of connected that back to my core values and the things that I find important in life. So not only, I feel like in that essay, I was talking about my extracurriculars, but I was also kind of showing them who I am as a person as well in a way.
Did you have a favorite supplemental essay by any chance? I know that we kind of discussed this.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like either that essay that I was talking about, like the extracurricular one, or I'd say my personal statement I really enjoyed writing.
Right. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your personal statement? I know the last time we met, you told me that you had written a few drafts, like during your rides from Abu Dhabi to Dubai, you wrote a draft about like Disneyland or something. How did you finally have that aha moment? Like, when did you decide this is the topic that I will be doing for my personal statement?
It definitely took a long time, like, as you know, to come up with a solid idea that I really love.
Right.
But it started just from our brainstorming activity we had together. So what I did is that I made a pie chart and then put down like different aspects of my personality or my character and then put them in percentages. So what I noticed is that the two biggest part were family and music. And so I definitely knew that that is what I wanted to portray in my Common App essay, my personal essay. And so I kept thinking and thinking, and I just didn't know how to like merge the two together. So I had so many drafts, like you said, one about Disneyland. I had one about like a concert. I had one about an exam that I did. And I think just by writing those, they kind of like built upon each other. And I landed on this idea where I could just start writing and I like finished the whole thing. And I felt like it really showed my character and was a good representation of myself. And that's when I knew that it was a good topic to write about.
Yeah. How many drafts did you have, if you remember? And also, when did you decide that this is finished and you should like go on with the supplemental essays?
In terms of like full drafts, I want to say like different 6 or 7 different ideas at first, but I had like a lot of free writes. I tried a lot of things. Some things I just didn't even show you because I was like, this isn't good. I'm just gonna like leave it to the side. I knew that it was final after reading my essay. I just felt proud of it, and I felt like, you know, like this is something that I really like. It's an essay that I'm really proud of, and I'm proud to show to other people. And that's when I knew that it was complete.
Definitely. And I think your essay in particular is one of my personal favorites just because I was able to relate to it. And also I can tell like how much you evolved through that essay or how much the essay evolved because of all the drafts we did. I think it was like 12 drafts actually.
Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah. In terms of applying early, I know that you were deciding between NYU Stern and Wharton at Upenn. And this is something we also discussed with your mom. And I remember your mom was like, oh, I think maybe she should apply to Stern, but I was very adamant about like Upenn, Wharton. How did you decide to push through with Wharton?
So the spring break of my junior year, I actually went to go visit a ton of colleges, and I had like a broad idea of what I wanted. So I knew that I wanted like a mid-sized school, and something that was important to me was campus feel. And I think after visiting every college, like Upenn was definitely one that I could envision myself going to, like envision myself contributing to the community. And I just loved like the feeling on campus. So I feel like after the visit is when I knew that Upenn was the one for me.
Did you visit other colleges as well?
Yeah, I visited a ton in New York, Pennsylvania, DC, like just all around, just so I can get an idea of what I wanted in a college and what I also didn't really want in college.
And in terms of like deciding your final college list, how many colleges did you end up applying to, or how many colleges did you intend on applying to?
So at first, my college list was a little long. I was planning on applying to like 23, which is a lot. But for early action or early decision, I applied to a total of 8 schools, and Upenn was one of them, and it was an early decision school. And when I found out I got in, I rescinded all my other applications, and I just didn't submit any of the other ones.
And just so everyone knows, like, why do you think it's important to rescind your other applications?
So when your application is out there for like all the other schools, they're
Mm-hmm.
still considering you as a candidate and an applicant for their college. But if you get into an early decision school, that's a binding decision. So you have to go to the school. So it's a very important choice to make. And when you apply, you have to make sure that that's like your one school, like your dream school. So if your application's still there and you take the spot of someone else who, like maybe that school's their top school or their dream school, you're taking their place in a way. So I definitely think rescinding your application is important.
It's funny you told me that you applied to 24, or you were going to apply to 24 schools, because I actually applied to 23 schools.
Oh,
So that's another thing I just discovered we
yeah.
have in common.
Mhm.
What did you think about like some of the supplements? Were there any that you didn't like out of the schools that you did apply to? Like, were there any that you found challenging, and how did you deal with the challenging ones?
I mean, I would say there was one supplemental essay. It was only like 50 or 100 words. That was like, talk about something new that you discovered, or like something that surprised you. And I feel like that's such like a loaded question, and it's so hard to describe in 50 to like 100 words. And I remember also we were talking. I didn't really like the USC like quick fire questions, like what's your favorite food, what's your favorite movie, because like they're only a couple of words, and like we were thinking a lot into it. Like I was like, are they expecting me to like be witty about it? Are they expecting me to like write like a whole thing about it? So I definitely preferred the ones that were longer and I could really elaborate on all the points.
Was it helpful for you to read like sample essays?
Yeah, for sure. Like for example, the why essay that a lot of schools have, I didn't really have an idea of how I should format it, how I should structure it. And so before I was kind of making like a bullet point essay. So I was like, I like this school because of A, I like this school also because of B. But through reading the samples, I realized that you have to kind of intertwine your own experiences and the schools, and not only talk about what the school can do for you, but also what you can do for the school in a way.
Right. I'm going to test your knowledge a little bit. Do you remember like
Right.
the outline I told you about the supplemental essays, and maybe can you share that with everyone here?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about the layout I did for my
Okay.
essay, for my personal statement essay.
No, for
or the Y
for the
essay.
supplement. Yeah, the Y essay.
Yeah. So for the Y essay, I started talking about an internship that I did. And then I related the skills I learned from my internship back to Wharton's curriculum and how I can build upon the skills at Wharton and what resources they have for me to build upon the skills. And then I went back to my personal experience and I talked about a documentary, a business documentary that I filmed. And I elaborated a little bit about that. And then went back to Wharton's programs or research opportunities that are kind of similar to what I did. And then I talked about what I wanted in school and how Upenn had it. So I think just going back and forth between your experiences and what the school can offer is a good format.
Okay, good. So obviously, I think your essays really stood out. Were there any other components of your application that you think really stood out?
So obviously, I like I mentioned a lot of times before in this talk, music was a big part of my life. So obviously, I recorded some pieces that I play on the piano, some of my favorite pieces, and I submitted that as well with my application. And I think the leadership activities that I have on campus, or the leadership roles I have, definitely made me stand out as well.
I think that reminds me. So the UC essay, or not UC essay, the UC application is a lot different in the activity section than the Common App application. Do you remember the difference? And if so, can you describe what the difference is?
So I think for the UC one, you have more slots to fill out.
Right.
Right. And you have less description space as well. So what I did is that I had everything down on the Common App, and then I just basically had to like make it like shorter and less lengthy in a way.
I think, if I remember correctly, I think the UC descriptions were actually longer. And
they were?
Yeah. But you're right in terms of you could add more activities in the UC application. For you, did you prefer the UC application over the Common App? Did you have a certain preference? And which one took longer for you to fill out?
I'd say the one that took longer was definitely the UC one because they have such like a unique layout in a way. So like even like putting in my grades, putting in everything, that was a long process. But I preferred the UC application because I also attached a resume with my application, and I had some other activities that I couldn't fit in the Common App. So I just had the chance to like just listen on the UC app.
Your resume, by the way, is like my it's like a role model for mine, because I remember
gosh,
yours was
you.
like yours was 5 pages when I first saw it. So in terms of condensing it, I know with my juniors now, like we're working on condensing their resumes because typically they end up longer than 2 pages, and we want to, you know, make it 2 pages as much as possible, or even just 1 page. How did you end up cutting things out? Like, how did you determine what to cut out of your resume?
So looking through like my whole list, there's some activities that I spent 1 year doing, some that I spent like 8 years doing. So obviously the one that I spent longer time on had more significance for me, and I thought was more important. So I definitely wanted to put that in. And I think putting them in different sections. So for example, like my piano competitions that I won, instead of listing every single one out as like their separate bullet points, I would say won various competitions such as, and then list like 2 or 3.
Right. Is there anything from high school or from like the application process that you would do differently?
I want to say no, because I feel like everything I did brought me to like where I am, and my acceptance to Wharton, which was my dream school, is my dream school. So I'd say no, but I think the process, like everything that we've done so far, was pretty good, I think.
So a fun fact about Hanna, she was the only one from Andover who got in early to Upenn, correct?
Yeah.
And something that I really like that you did, you were very mindful of that, because I know that you told me a lot of people from your school applied to Upenn. How did your mom react? I know that your parents are watching. How did they react when you got in?
So I can tell you the story of like how I figured it out, or like how I knew that I got in. So I was at slam practice, and obviously I like lead the practices and stuff. And they're between 6:30 to 8, and the decisions came out at like, I want to say 7. So in between the practices, and I was like, I'm not going to check. I'm going to wait till the end of the day. Like if it's bad news, like I don't want to ruin my whole day. I don't want to ruin practice. So I went back to my dorm. I like opened it up. I told you first, and then my roommate found out, and then I texted my mom and dad. They were super happy, obviously, but it was also the middle of the night here for them. So I feel like they were still like, they like stayed up all night too. So they were definitely very happy.
Did your mom know that like you would get the decision that day? Because I know that she also does like university research as well on her own. Did she know when the decisions would come out?
Yeah, she knew when it came out, but she was very good with being like, you know what, take your time, like open it whenever you want to. But like when you do, let me know what happened, like what the news is. So yeah, she was waiting. She was definitely waiting for the news, but she didn't like push me one direction to be like, open it.
And how did your teachers respond when you got in and when you told them?
Yeah, so I told my teachers who wrote my recommendation first, because they were obviously curious throughout the whole process. They were definitely super proud of me as well. I like since I go to boarding school, it's really easy to just like grab a meal with your teachers at their apartment, like with their family and things like that. So I had a meal with both my teachers, and they were just super happy for me too.
So you brought up a good point about teachers and letters of recommendation. Do you think it's necessary to, I know that you're going to be majoring in finance. So do you think it's necessary to get teachers who are kind of related to that field of study, or it's not necessary?
I think it could be important, but for me, at least, I know that I got my English teacher to write my one recommendation, my French teacher to write the other. And the reason for that is because like I definitely had a really close relationship with both of them, and I feel like they knew my character really well and could accurately represent me. So I think that if you happen to be close to your like math teacher, stat teacher, whatever, that's great. But it's definitely not a requirement, because like I didn't ask any of my STEMI teachers to write recommendations for me.
Were there any challenges that you faced in the college application process?
I think definitely making my college list was like a hard thing, because I definitely wanted a balanced list, but also like a ambitious list at the same time. And I think
Right.
since it's like my first experience with applying to college, like I didn't even know what to expect. So just like making the list manageable, but also like covering all my bases was kind of difficult.
And what were like some of the criteria that you kept in mind when making your list?
So, like I was saying before, I definitely wanted like a mid-sized school, campus feel, and a close-knit community as well.
Mm-hmm. I know that you got like a really stellar ACT score. Do you think, is that something that you definitely kept in mind when making your list? Obviously, I'm pretty sure it was.
I feel like it was to a certain extent, but also like there's so many kids who have like top scores as well. And like having a perfect score or like a really high score isn't gonna give you 100% chance of getting into a certain college. So like I had the requirements for that school, but I was also mindful being like, I'm not sure, it could go either way.
Did your expectations change at all when you were doing your university research? And also, when did you start doing your university research?
So at our school, we have an in-school like college counseling program, and they kind of like, we had like once a month meetings, like group meetings, where they just like talk to us a little bit about like the college process, and telling us like, hey guys, like you're gonna apply to college in a couple of months, just like be mindful. If you can go visit colleges, go visit them, and just like start doing your research. So I just started a little bit from there, but obviously as the deadline was closer, I did a lot more. Yeah.
If you could give advice to the people, to juniors who are getting ready to apply, is there any specific advice that you would give?
Definitely to start your essays during the summer, especially if you're going to apply to a ton of schools, because that's a lot of essays to write. And so I know that I had my personal statement pretty much done by the end of summer, and that was super helpful, especially since my senior fall, like I was taking really hard classes and like I had so much homework to do, and I didn't have that much time or as much as I wanted to focus on my college apps. And I also had like some supplemental essays drafted, so I could reuse a lot of them for different schools. So I didn't have that much pressure for me.
Just so students get like an idea of like the timeline, when did you start writing your supplemental essays, and how much time would you dedicate in writing your essays? Like how many hours per week? What days would you work on them?
I definitely started early for my personal statement. I'd say like beginning of summer, I didn't have like any strict or rigorous like schedule. Just whenever I feel it, just whenever I felt like I wanted to write, I just do like a small free write just to brainstorm ideas. But I'd say like my serious drafts was towards like the end of summer, like mid to end of summer. I started like focusing and like allocating time to write my personal statement.
I think if I remember correctly, what we did together, we would like bullet point or brainstorm or word vomit, ideas that we had for your essay, and then develop sort of an outline, and then you would write. Do you think that this is a recommended process for other students to use? Or are there any other methods that you would recommend to students?
I think it depends on what sort of writer they are, but at least for me, I know that we're pretty much the same in this part too. Like I'm very much a perfectionist, so if I write like an essay or something, I need to have like a framework in mind of being like, this is the starting point, then it's gonna go here, then here, then here. So having that framework definitely helped. Just like frame my whole essay, because normally like if I didn't have that, I'd like start writing, I'd be like, I feel like I can do that better, and then start over again. And I just end up like spending an hour, 2 hours, just like writing the same thing again and again.
Did you end up showing like your teachers or your parents or even like your friends any of your essays and getting feedback from them as well?
I read them to my parents and I shared them with my parents. I think at school, like a lot of my friends are definitely stressed with like schoolwork, college work. So I didn't have the time to share with them. But yeah, I think my parents, since they know me the best out of like anyone, reading it to them and being like, do you think this is like me? And then them replying, I think that's like a good signal of whether it's a good personal statement or not.
And how are you able, I know that you have like a lot, like 500 million, like extracurricular activities. So how are you able to manage that and, you know, write your essays and excel in your academics?
Yeah, so in terms of my extracurriculars, like senior year, especially like you're going from like a board member of a club, like co-head or like a higher position. So that takes up a lot more of your time. And I think just like sitting down and like writing down things like for example, for me, I'm cluster co-president at my school, and that took up like honestly like 7 or 8 hours a week. So I'd write down like on my schedule, like Monday, this time to this time is like cluster meeting, this time is like disciplinary committee. And then between those spaces, like fill out things that I wanted to do. And I think senior year as well, since the hours for each extracurricular activity like increased, I definitely had to like drop a lot of things that I also wanted to do. I think finding the balance, because like between like social life, academic life, and like just like personal life too is definitely really important.
So just to remind me, and also just to let everyone know, were there other Ivy League schools that you had intended to apply to early? Or that you applied to early?
There weren't any early ones, because I think all of them were regular decision or binding early decision one. So I knew that Upenn was my dream school, so obviously that was the one I applied to early.
And I know that a lot of students at Hale want to apply to the Ivies. So do you have any specific advice for those applying to Ivy League universities, or those who want to apply to Ivy Leagues?
I'd say the interview portion is a very critical part of your whole application, because they get a lot of, obviously Ivy Leagues, they get so many applications, and the thing that makes you stand out is like your personality and your character. So in your interview, like make sure to do your research before, like know everything about the school, and go into the interview like showing them that you really want to be a part of their community. And I think if you have a good interview, that could play a really good, that could be a really good aspect to your whole application.
And I know that we did a mock interview together. So I'm an official interviewer for Georgetown. And did you find that mock interview helpful? Because I remember you telling me that your actual Upenn interview was pretty different from the mock interview that we had. Did you think mine was harder? What kinds of questions did they ask, if you're allowed to tell? Did you find the Upenn interview hard? That's like my main question.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. At least for me, it didn't feel like a formal sit-down interview. It was more like just a conversation, like one we're having right now, just like a conversation. And like my interviewer didn't really have like this question answer, this question answer. It was more so like he'd ask me a question. I'd be like, how's your home life, or like how's your school life? And I'd say something, and he'd ask me like a specific thing I said, and like I build upon it. So it's not very like it wasn't as formal or robotic as I expected it to be.
Was your interviewer, if he was like a younger alumni, right?
Yeah, he was a younger alumni.
Did you end up like hearing back from him after, or did you send a thank you note? Do you think it's necessary to send a thank you note after your interview?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to like just send like a little thank you, just be like, thank you so much for like spending your time, because obviously they're like volunteer interviewers and they don't have to do it. And I just really enjoyed our conversation that we had. So I just wanted to say thank you as well.
Something that I like that you did prior to your Georgetown interview, and also you did a Georgetown interview, right?
Yeah, Georgetown and Upenn.
You had researched your interview beforehand. Do you think that helped with the interview at all?
My interviewer? I mean, I did like brief research on him, but it wasn't things I could mention in my interview, because then like he'd be like, how do you know that about me? And I can't just really be like research you beforehand. But the thing that I found that was important for the interview, or like kind of important, is that he went to the business school as well at Georgetown. So I could definitely cater a lot of my after interview questions to the business curriculum and think about that in depth, because I know that he knew a lot about it.
Do you have a good idea of what specific courses you'd like to take when you go to Wharton, or specific professors that you want to take, or you want to, meet?
Yes. Yeah. So I know that in my Y essay, I had to do a lot of research for the courses. And there was this one professor called Dr. Adam Grant. And so like I watched like one of his talks, and he gave like a really compelling analogy or story about him being at a call center and like increasing like call retention rates. And I don't know, ever since I wrote about him in my essay, he just keeps popping up everywhere in my life. Like I was on like TikTok and I saw like his like speech on there. So like he just keeps popping up. So I definitely want to take his class. And he teaches his class called economic behaviorisms. And I know that that's like a topic that I'm super interested about. And I was looking at like the mock schedule for Upenn too, and he has like it's a 3-hour seminar every week. So definitely something that I want to do my freshman year, hopefully.
Something that's unique about the U.S. college experience is that you could take courses from many different disciplines. So aside from business, are there any other fields that you'd like to explore when you're at Upenn?
Yeah, so during my high school career, like my junior year, specifically, I took AP Comp Sci, and that was like my first ever experience with computer science. And I fell in love with Comp Sci. Like I really, really enjoyed it because it's very similar to math, and math was always one of my favorite subjects. And then my senior year, I kind of went into Comp Sci a little bit more, and I could veer off the track of like AP Comp Sci curriculum. So I did like tracking motions, like facial recognition, that sort of stuff. So I'm definitely interested in comp sci, and hopefully I'll be able to minor in comp sci at college too.
I remember this was also something that you had mentioned in your supplemental essays. So do you think that students applying should mention, the different fields that they're into as well? Or do you think that's like a necessary thing?
It depends on the prompt. But right. I think definitely mention what you intend on majoring on. So the majority of my essays were based on finance and business. But wherever I could, I would mention computer science or like interdisciplinary courses between computer science and business.
Were there any weird prompts that you encountered, like unique prompts? So for example, UChicago is known for having very unique creative prompts. I know that you didn't end up applying to UChicago. We were considering it. But were there any that you really struggled to answer because it was just so unique?
Not really, I want to say. Well, because I feel like UChicago is like infamous for having like these really unique prompts, but a lot of the other schools pretty much had like similar-ish essay prompts, at least for the ones that I applied to.
Were there any other parts of the Common App specifically, or the UC app, that you found difficult?
So the UC app, like I mentioned before, like putting in your grades was very tedious for me, especially since I switched different high schools, and so I had to put like the first grading system on my grades, second grading system, and especially inputting my British curriculum grades into like the American system, like grading system, like it was pretty difficult for me to like match them up.
I remember that you had to do, or you did part of the additional information section. I think you did, you submitted something for the additional information section, both in the Common App and the UC app. Can you just tell everyone like what you decided to write about in that section?
So in that section, I talked about why I wanted to change high schools and just like explain a little bit about the British curriculum versus the American curriculum. And I also mentioned the grading systems because my high school's grading system changed from my 9th grade to my 10th grade.
I think we're almost out of time, so I wanted to open the floor up if anyone has any questions. Or Peter, do you have any questions?
That was amazing. Very cool. I love the energy. So inspiring, Hanna. My CV is not 5 pages long, and I think I'm twice your age, or more than twice your age. So incredibly impressive. I just have 2 questions now, and both are related to each other. One, why did you decide to leave Cranleigh? And 2, what was your actual experience like at Phillips Andover, which is, the most prestigious, arguably, boarding school in the entire United States?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, so I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the British curriculum, but at that point, I had just finished my GCSEs. And it was time to pick like my 3 or 4 subjects for A levels. And at that point, like I still had a lot of interest in many different fields, and it was hard for me like pick one subject over another. And so I did a little bit of research on the American curriculum, British curriculum, and I was just thinking about like boarding schools just around the globe. And I think the American curriculum especially stood out to me because of the range of subjects you can do, and especially at my school, like the difficulty level you can do. There are also very niche courses that you can take as well. So that was definitely something that I was looking for in a school. And also in terms of Phillips Academy, like I loved it there so much. Like it was such a great experience. Like I'd say that I was definitely a much more independent person because I was basically living on my own. I made so many like lifelong friends, and I also learned a lot in terms of like academics as well.
Incredible. I just have one more quick question. We have a lot of great questions from the audience that we're going to get to, and I will call if there is a name attached to the question on the individual to ask that question. So if you have some questions, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Last question for you, Hanna. What was the best part about working with Ariane?
Oh, I loved Ariane so much. Like she mentioned, like we have so many similarities. I feel like we're kind of like the same person. She just got me. She got my writing style. And every like criticism she had on my writing was like so like specific and detailed. And she definitely helped my essays improve so much throughout the whole college like process.
Amazing.
Oh,
Ariane, you must be proud. You're proud older sister, baby.
Hanna was such a pleasure to work with, and I also really miss her mom would always like come with her in the sessions. She wouldn't sit with us, but you know, they both came all the way from Abu Dhabi to Dubai, so I would see the mom. And her mom was so knowledgeable. Like she would do university research as well, like on her own. She knew when like the decisions were gonna come out, and I think she's actually watching now. So I miss you. Hi.
We can make her a panelist. She can help answer the questions then. Amazing, incredible. So I'm just going to ask some of the questions here that some of the attendees have posed. Now, the first question is from an anonymous attendee. It says, as an international student, what would you say the biggest challenge for you was? And I think that question is about applying and getting into such a prestigious school as Wharton.
Well, I think my experience was a little bit different to like a standard international student, since I went to an American boarding school. So I had a feel of what the American curriculum is sort of like. But I think definitely, obviously like the whole visa side of it. But I think normally, in terms of essay and in terms of like what I wanted to portray in my application, it wasn't as hard as I thought it was. It's a pretty like streamlined process.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing that experience. Another question from an anonymous attendee. How did you manage your time with answering all your essays? Good question.
Yeah, so definitely spending time in the summer to like be really self-reflective and think about your core values and what you want to put forth in the application process into the people who are judging your application, and thinking about who you are as a person, because that's obviously what you want your application to portray. So like I said, beginning of summer, I started thinking about what I wanted to write for my personal statement, and I had it pretty much done by the end. And I think once you finish your first essay, that's kind of like a confidence booster, and you can just like keep going and write all your other essays as well.
Incredible. Thank you. And Dhruv has a question, and I'm going to allow you to talk, Dhruv, and ask your question directly to Hanna. Please ask away. Oh, you're muted. No, you should be good.
I'm okay. Thank you, Peter. Hi, how many letters of recommendations did you use, and which one do you think carried the most value?
So for me, I had 2 letters of recommendation, one for my English teacher and one for my French teacher. I'd say they were both as strong as each other, because like they're 2 of my favorite teachers. Like I'd regularly have like lunch with them, dinner with them, especially at my boarding school. It was pretty easy to do. And they both knew me really, really well.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dhruv. We have the next question, which is, I think, for Ariane. Why leadership experience is important to Ivy League schools. Why is it, Ariane? As a graduate in Ivy League school yourself, the master's degree from Harvard in education, how would you answer that?
I think that leadership experience shows your initiative. It shows like certain values that you have, and definitely like in your essays, you want to exhibit that you have these values. Also, yeah, I mean, that's my answer. Hannah, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I think what you said was like pretty much like hit it on the head. I think also like showing leadership, having leadership roles kind of shows your responsibility and your ability to like contribute to the community that you're going into as well.
And it also shows how you will be able to contribute to the school that you're applying to. So I remember for Hannah's essays, for example, for the why essays, she would talk about her own experience, and then she would relate it to how she could contribute to the Upenn community, for example, or the NYU community.
Right. And I would just like to add the universities, all the universities in the U.S., not just the Ivy League schools, care about who you are as a human being, as a person, how you spend your time, right? They're not just interested in you as a student, because as we know, emotional intelligence is extremely important. Leadership is important. Being able to work in teams is important. Empathy. These are all the characteristics that will make you a successful human being, not just not just relevant to being a good test taker, which some students have the academic gift, but they don't have the interpersonal skills, right, or the depth of interest that will make them, kind of relatable and effective in communicating with others and working with them. So that's great. I think we have a question from Mahika. And Mahika, I'm going to allow you to talk so you can ask your question directly. Please ask away.
So since you moved from doing GCSEs to an American curriculum, I'm also, I just finished my GCSEs and I was thinking of moving to an American curriculum, but like, is it very challenging and is there a huge change? Like, would it be recommended?
Yeah, good question. So definitely there are a lot of aspects that are different in the American system to the British system. Like, for example, for me at least, like going into my first year at Phillips Academy, like people or like students normally take one science the whole year. So for example, like the GCSEs, I took all 3 sciences. In the American curriculum, like we really go in depth on one subject. And then another thing that I noticed was like one of the biggest differences was the math curriculum. So I know that for GCSE math, like you had a little bit of algebra, a little bit of like calc, a little bit of geometry. But in the American system, at least how my school works, is that we have a whole course, like a term-long course, focused on geometry solely. And so you go into a lot of detail into that. And then after that, you go into the pre-calc course, and then you go into the calculus course. So definitely going to my school, it was hard to find my place in terms of like my level for schools, because there are some things that I've learned that they haven't and vice versa. So those two would definitely be the biggest things that were different for me.
Great. Mahika, do you have any other questions? I think you might have had one more.
So how did you cope up with the challenge, and did you take any AP classes?
Yeah, so I took a ton of AP classes at my school, so like AP Music, AP Calc, AP Comp Sci, AP Chem, and those are definitely really important because like those are pretty challenging classes, and this shows the colleges that we've learned things to a really high level. What was the first question?
How did you cope up with the difference?
Yeah, so it definitely took some time to get used to it because, like I said, there's some things that they've learned prior to the courses that I haven't. So I'm not gonna lie, at first there's definitely a lot of like self-studying that you have to do, and it's really up to you to fill up that gap. But I'd say it only took me like around 2 to 3 weeks to catch up and learn those like basic ideas and principles, and after that it was completely fine.
Thank you.
Amazing. Very good questions. I think that's all the questions that we have today, but I have one final question for you, Hanna, and that is for the students that are Zooming in and the ones that will watch this webinar later who want to be like you next year, 2 years from now. What advice would you give them looking back on your journey? What are 3 or 4 kind of just pieces of advice that you could share with them to make it more manageable?
Yeah, I think like a running theme throughout the whole thing, or like something that I've been saying a lot, is to start early, because that's so, so, so important. Because obviously when you start school, like you don't only have the college process to focus on, but also your like academics. So starting early is super important. I think also another thing is like being confident in yourself. It could be kind of hard because you look at all these stats, like acceptance rate, 10%, like acceptance rate, like whatever, like all these ridiculously low acceptance rates. I think it's important to be like confident in yourself and to think like wherever I end up is where I'm meant to be, and to just be like satisfied with yourself is really important.
Incredible, incredible insight, incredible advice. Ariane, your closing thought on this wonderful journey that you took together with Hanna, and any other experiences you'd like to share with everybody that's watching.
It's just amazing how much like Hanna and I have in common. Like working with you has been so cool, just because I kind of saw a reflection of myself. My personal favorite experience with you was working on the essays, particularly your personal statement, which obviously came out really great. I also just remembered for your college list, I think something that you did when you were applying early, you had some safeties in there. You had specifically Fordham University, correct?
Yeah.
Do you think it's necessary when people are building their college list or deciding where to apply early that they have safeties in that list for their early applications?
Yeah, I think your whole college list has to be really balanced, because you can't just apply to all the top schools and expect to get in one place. It's better to like cover all your bases. So I know for my college list, I had 4 different columns. So I had safety, likely, unlikely, and reach. And I kind of put all the schools I was going to apply to in these 4 categories. And I think I had like 4 in each section, or 4 or 5 in each section. And I think that is what made my list so balanced, and made sure that I had like a good chance of getting in.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Hanna, for being here, for sharing your journey. Thank you, Ariane, for being the guide on the journey.
Thank you.
We'll stay tuned for the next chapter of the Hanna story. We'd love to see how you continue to grow and evolve. And Ariane, I think we'll stay tuned for the next chapter of the Ariane story when it comes to the applications for the juniors.
Oh, right. And I'm looking forward to helping. I don't know if any of my juniors are watching, but I'm looking forward to the essay personal statement process in particular. That's probably my favorite part of the whole process.
Amazing, and we're looking forward to welcoming you back to the UAE. And
Can't
Hanna, we
wait,
look
yeah.
forward to seeing you soon as well. So thank you, everybody who zoomed in.
Thank
we hope
you.
to see you soon. If anybody has any questions about how Hale can help, please drop us an email, info@haleeducation.com. I'll be happy to help. Have a great evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.